Good evening, everyone. This is Dolores Cannon with the Metaphysical Hour. And we've been gone for quite a while, but now we're live tonight. This is November the 8th, 2013. And we just got back from a wonderful cruise of the Panama Canal. But we've just been going every week, so it's really hard to be here to do the shows. But we're here tonight to talk about all the things that have happened to us, and if anybody wants to call in, feel free to do it, because we're going to be gone again. We're on the road. Feel like Willie Nelson, on the road again.
I think that's our mantra.
Our theme song.
Yes.
Okay. But before we get into the cruise, we did a cruise of the Panama Canal. We had a class on the cruise. But right before we did that, we unexpectedly was called to go out to Hollywood.
Do you want to give the toll-free number first before you go into all that?
I guess I better. Yeah, because we are, I said you could call in, anybody that wants to call in. Okay, the toll-free number is 1-888-627-6008. 888-627-6008. Well, it's been 3 weeks ago now or more. Yeah, we thought we were going to have a week off, and we were called to go out to Hollywood, and I was filming for a movie they're making out there about UFOs, and they're really working hard on it.
Oh, yeah.
It's called 701. Now, it's an unusual title, but it's because they said the government... it says the UFOs doesn't exist, but they said there were 701 cases that they couldn't explain, couldn't put into any kind of a category of anything that was known. So 701 cases that are unexplained. So that's why they're calling the movie.
Yeah, it has to do with their Project Blue Book.
Yeah, the Project Blue Book and all of the ones that are on record.
Right.
So they said 701 were not explained. And so they're filming on a lot of that information.
Right.
And it's interesting because they are bringing up things that I have not heard of in any other films we've done. And I go to all these UFO conferences and film for a lot of these UFO films, and they are bringing up some unknown stuff. Or it's not unknown; it's never been filmed before. But it was really a very weird place that we had it in.
Well, no, it's really cool how they do things out there. So.
This was a house in the Hollywood Hills, and way up in the middle there. It looks like one of the old parts of Hollywood.
Right.
From back in the old glamour days. And they said one of the Batman films were filmed there in that house.
One of the movies, they had one of them, but they never could tell us which one it was. We're going to have to go and watch the movies to see.
If we can find out, because this was the weirdest, strangest house I've ever seen. We was calling it the Halloween house, because I said, oh boy, I bet somebody could really have a fantastic Halloween party in that house.
Right.
It was so creepy. It reminds you of horror films. But the whole building was, 3 floors? 4 floors?
It may have been 4 floors.
We were on the 3rd floor. Mm-hmm. But the whole house was full of props, and it was just like every corner had something different in it. And everywhere you looked, it was weird and strange things. Some was very, very old stuff, antique stuff, and things they could use for any kind of filming they wanted to do. And but they said that was the ideal place. You could just set up one corner of any room and have it be the background for anything you wanted to film.
Right.
So that's probably the reason. Oh,
well, it is. I mean, what they said is a lot of these people with the older houses, they'll take them and they'll rent them out for this. It helps them, pay for the house. And then for the people doing the films, it's less expensive than renting a studio, and it's got more ambiance.
Yeah, more stuff to pick from.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody lives there full time. I don't see how they could.
Right.
It's just so full of stuff.
It may be like a vacation home.
I wouldn't want to stay there overnight. It gave me the
That may be why they rented out.
It gave me the creep.
Although I think some people were staying there while they were doing all of this. Some of them were.
Well, one thing that was creepy when you first walk in, it had an elevator that took you up to the different floors. And it reminded me of these old movies where you were in the elevators were like cages, and you could see out. But in those movies where they would get stuck between floors or something.
Well, they could have been made there in that house. That could remind you of it because it could be the same elevator.
It very could well be because it was very creepy. And you had the feeling as it was going through the floors real slow that it could get stuck, with the murderer and the slasher right outside.
Oh, my goodness.
That's what it reminded me of because it was an open cage. The whole place was just, I don't know. It's hard telling what all's been done there.
Yeah, but around the elevator had this big spiral staircase that would go up, and it kept going that would go the floors and around the elevator.
So you could use either side, I guess. And we were on the third floor, and on that floor, I don't know how they did it, but they had like a fountain and a pool and trees, like a little garden outside where we were.
Meditation area.
But how could they do that on the third floor?
This is on a hill, so it could have been this house is going up on the side of this hill.
That's where the trees have got their roots.
Could be.
The whole thing was weird. But it looked like in those days they put houses everywhere all over Hollywood, and they'd go up in these winding streets to go up there.
Right.
But it was really a very weird place. So we were out there for a couple of days doing the filming for that, and they were bringing in different speakers and people in this field from everywhere. And if you don't do anything in Hollywood, it's always hurry up and wait. It takes a long time to film even the smallest parts. But I've done a lot of that, but I've never done it in a place like that.
So that was a new experience.
We were saying, I'll bet they're going to have fun here Halloween. Somebody's probably rented that whole building out for a Halloween party.
Probably.
It was just before Halloween. So anyway, that was a strange one. Mm-hmm. We never know where we're going to end up.
That's the fun of it.
That was a surprise because we thought we were going to have that week off. And then we got back and we went on the cruise. We've been wanting to have a class on a cruise. We have a lot of classes, but they're always in hotels. And we had the idea this last year, why don't we have a class on a cruise? We didn't know if anybody would be interested like we were, but we said, why don't we combine a vacation with a class? And so we were looking at the different kinds we could do. And I've always wanted to go through the Panama Canal and find out more about that. That's one place we haven't been. So I said, why don't we look into that? But in order to have enough days at sea to have a class, it had to be a 2-week cruise. Because you can't have classes or workshops or lectures when they're in port. Everybody wants to get off the ship and go see things. So we chose this one with the Panama Canal, but it was 2 weeks. Toward the end, I think we was beginning to think it was getting a little long. We were ready to come home.
Yeah, that was a lengthy cruise. I mean, the longest we had been on before that was 10 days.
That was the year before, last year, when we did a cruise of the Mediterranean.
It was nice. It's just we were working most of it, so it might have been different if it was more of a vacation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But everybody else was having fun with it. They all said they really enjoyed it. We ended up with more people than we thought we were going to have.
Right.
At 40 in the class, and they were it was really enjoying it. And it was just different. You're on a rocking floor instead of a solid floor. But right after we were going out, they said that Hurricane Raymond was coming up through Mexico. It used to be hurricanes never were on that side.
It was coming across. It went across. It was from the Gulf, and it was going across. It went across land, and then it was going across the Pacific. It was going out.
That's how it got over there. Mm-hmm. Because usually they wouldn't hit that side of America. But I think it was the second or third day we were out, and they said the ship was going along the coast of California and Mexico, so it was smooth waters in there. And then they said this hurricane was coming, and they were supposed to be pulled into a port.
Yeah, it was our established port. We were at Puerto Vallarta, and we were supposed to leave that evening
to go to the next port, down going south. But then they said because the hurricane was coming in there, they decided to stay another day.
Well, the hurricane was going across. They were going to sit there and let it pass in front, and then where they headed out again.
Yeah, because otherwise they would have been right in the middle of it. And you don't want to be in the middle of a hurricane if you're on any kind of a ship. Because my husband, Johnny, was on the carrier one time, and they misjudged where it was, and it was back so long ago, they didn't have the exact way of tracking these things as they do now. But he was on an aircraft carrier, and they misjudged and got right in the path of one. And it was terrible because it tore the ship all up. And he said those waves were so high that the ship would come up and then slam down. And so it tore up the whole deck, the landing part where the planes would land. And it tore big holes in the sides of the ship. And they were tying themselves to chairs and everything to keep from flying around the room. So he said that was one of the...
I'd be wanting off of that ship.
Well, that was one of
I'm getting off at the next...
They were out in the middle of the ocean. They couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
But I think, I don't know if they blamed the captain or what, but they misjudged where it was going to be. But he said that was one of the most memorable experiences he had when he was on there, and he was on in Korea and Vietnam. But when it finally limped back to port, all tore up, they put it in dry dock and had to make repairs, so he got off the ship then. Mm-hmm. But so, when he talked, that was a carrier is a huge ship.
Huge, yeah.
That if that happened to that, I don't know what it would be like with a passenger liner like we were.
Well, our ship was larger, and you can probably tell the story about what happened in San Diego, but ours was larger than the carrier. But I don't know. I mean, it's probably the same because they're all steel. They're all, it wouldn't have been, we would be people that wouldn't know how to necessarily handle a situation. They knew to tie themselves to chairs. Well, people may not know to do that.
Some way to a post or something just to keep the otherwise
they would tell us stay seated, like on those few times when we had some rough stuff. But
they said just order room service and stay in your room.
Right.
But he said it was pretty bad, and he said even if you were to jump overboard when that was going on, you'd drown because there was, above the water, it was like mist in the air.
I don't think you mean that the way you said it. Of course you'd drown if you jumped overboard. But well, what did you really mean to say?
I meant if you thought you'd get a lifeboat and go over and do it that way, he said you'd drown anyway. Yeah, that makes more sense. Because he said about 5 to 6 feet up, it's like mist of water in the air above the waves. You couldn't breathe anyway. So it was very weird, the stories he told about that adventure in the middle of a hurricane. But anyway, we stayed overnight, so let it pass.
Did you want to talk about San Diego first?
Yeah.
Or?
But then, the next day, we did hit some rough water because that was like one of the last arms of that hurricane.
Or it was just a storm. I think it probably was one of the arms, but I think they were saying it was just a storm that was there. And it could have been that or a combination. But.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, that was the only rough part. But the captain was smart. Mm-hmm. He wasn't going to mess with a hurricane. So he did say later, this has been an eventful cruise.
Right, because there are other things that happen, too. But.
On the cruise.
Right.
So you never know what's going to happen. But, yeah, one thing that was really weird, we stayed overnight. We got to San Diego right before the ship was going to be pulling out the next day. We had to be on board. I always like to get there ahead of time. We went into San Diego and stayed at this hotel, and it was right across the street from the dock where you're going to get on the ship. And I did that on purpose because it'd be close. And we're sitting there in the hotel in the dining room looking out at the ships that were docked, I don't say parked, they're docked out there. And I saw this big aircraft carrier, and it had on the conning tower was a 41. I say, gee, that looks familiar, because my husband was a radar operator on aircraft carriers. That's what he did, guide the planes in that were taking off and landing on the carriers. So I said, that really looks familiar. I think that's the Midway. And so I asked the waiters, and they said, oh, yeah, that's the Midway. It's now a museum, and it's docked right there across the street from where we were in the hotel. Now, the interesting thing is that's the last carrier that my husband was on. And when he got on it, he was on it about 2 or 3 years, and they were going over to Vietnam, and the war was declared just as they were going across to Vietnam. And when they got there, they shot down the first MiG in the Vietnam War. Maybe that's one of the reasons they turned it into a museum. I don't know. But it's now a museum sitting there. Well, that was so strange because that was the last carrier he was on. It was like full circle. Things that all come full circle as far as our life was concerned. If you have read my book, 5 Lives Remembered, it tells about my beginning in all of this whole adventure we've been doing with the hypnosis and the classes and the books and everything. If you read that book, when he got off that carrier, when he got back from Vietnam, he came to Beeville, Texas, to the Navy base and was stationed there. And that was the last ship he was on. And then it began the adventure that ended up in what I'm doing now.
Right.
So it was like full circle. And we were looking at it, and I told Julia, I said, you could almost see him walking around on the deck over there. Because from our hotel room, we could see it real clearly. And it's had a lot of people on the deck because it is a museum. But you could almost see him there. And, of course, to me, that brought back so many memories of all of those years. And if there's not a military people out there, you know what it's like to be separated. And you're all by yourself. But I had a house full of kids, no money. And he's on the ship, and he was lonely. So it was just bringing all those memories back of those days. So I sat there kind of mentally going over it and talking to him. And anyway, the next morning we got on the cruise ship had pulled in right next to it, and we got on that. But I think none of this can be coincidence. The way it was all happening, it was like telling us full circle. Everything has come around. It's all completed. And as we pulled out of the harbor, we went right past it and pulled away from it. But it was one of a lot of very emotional memories for me. That's going back 45 years when all of this began in the 60s. Mm-hmm. But
well, that's closer to 50 years now.
Well, it was in 68 when I started all of this, but he came back, I think, in 66.
Okay.
So it is kind of getting close.
Right. 40, yeah.
But
5 plus, yeah.
Yeah, it's getting a lot up there. That's probably why the ship was getting too old. A lot of them were probably torn apart and used for scrap. But that one, maybe because of the history, was turned into a museum. And it's there in San Diego Harbor. But it's just really emotional to me to have all those memories about it as we're pulling out and watching it recede. I asked Julia to take pictures because I know we're never going to be out at that place again. But anyway, to make it even stranger was the next day. And I've told you many times of what the strange occurrences we have when we're having the class that happen. all kinds of weird stuff that they do. They like to play tricks, and they're very mischievous. Well, the next day, we started the first day of the class, and when the class was all in there, and I told them about that. And that was that carrier, because they'd all seen it, about what it meant to me. Anyway, after lunch, when we came back, I have a little digital clock that I keep in there while we're doing the class. And I looked at the clock after lunch, and it had switched to military time. Now, if you know what military time is, it's the same as what they use in Europe. It's just 24 hours.
A 24-hour clock.
Instead of the way we do it, we start over again at 1 o'clock afternoon. So it had switched to military time. And I looked at that and I said, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And I was showing it to the class. It couldn't have happened that me pushing the wrong button, because you have to push a couple of different buttons to switch it to that. So it was really weird, but it was like Julia said, it was almost like he was talking to us. That he heard us and he was talking to us after we were on the cruise then. So it was very emotional. To me, it meant something. Mm-hmm. For somebody else, it wouldn't make any sense. It meant something to me.
Somebody else might not have even noticed it.
Probably not. But all of a sudden, why was the clock on a different time?
Well, like we say, there's signs all over the place. They're constantly giving us signs.
You always say you said you're always giving us messages. We just have to learn to watch.
Right. Constantly messages.
Because tell them what you say, how you get different messages in different ways.
Well, just that. I mean, they've told me that we're constantly delivering messages to you, constantly talking to you. And we're all the time over here going, I wish they'd give me a sign. I wish they'd give me a sign. And they're constantly giving them to us. It's just up to us to recognize them. And sometimes they're actually signs, billboard signs or anything. They're actually signs. So it's all kinds of things. And it can be like that. It can be something, it has significance to you. It can be when the clocks go 11 and 22, and those are signs. Those are messages. Yeah. It can be you hear something on the radio, or you see something on television. Somebody walks up to you and says something. You read it in a book. A book falls on your head, and it's got exactly, opens to the page. It has something. All kinds of ways they deliver messages. So it's just a matter of being open to it.
Be aware.
Yeah.
Because like you said, people are saying, give me a sign, give me a sign. And then they don't.
And then they have expectations of what this sign is supposed to look like. No, just be open to however it may come through. And that's it. That's all. Because I've seen them hysterically. I see them when they're yelling at people. It's like, will you listen to me? And the person's going, I wish they'd tell me something.
We hear that all the time. Right. How can I talk to them? How can I hear them? Mm-hmm. We're always getting that.
Right.
We said
they're right there. They are right there just going, hello.
They've told us in many of my sessions they're screaming at us. Mm-hmm. But that's it. I think people expect it to be more dramatic. And many times I just hear a song on the radio, and I know they're telling me something.
Right. But see, you have to acknowledge that. Once you acknowledge that, then you'll get more things. But if you shut down on that and say, no, it's got to come this way, this is what it has to look like, then it won't happen, or it'll be very, very limited in what it can do. But if you'll just be open, acknowledge this one, then you'll have other things start coming in that you acknowledge. Every time you acknowledge something, it opens up more and more and more.
I think people expect it to be dramatic. Mm-hmm. Something really earth-shaking happen.
Oh, it is so
That'll get their attention.
It's so subtle, you don't even notice it. So you acknowledge it. Unless they finally pierce through the veil. Like I said, sometimes it comes through like somebody's yelling at you, because they are. And I think that's when it finally pierces through. Or you pierce, something pierced.
Well, we said, too, they're giving us messages all the time, slowly and subtly. Mm-hmm. And if you don't listen, eventually they're going to hit you up the side of the head.
Right.
They'll get your attention one way or the other, and you don't want to wait till that happens. That's when you're waiting for something dramatic, and even then, people don't recognize it as a message.
Exactly. And that's why they have to keep getting louder and louder, and then they're going, I wish they'd tell me, and you can see by their whole life they've had all these incidents happening where they've been talking over and over and then louder and louder and louder to them, and they still aren't hearing it or seeing it or anything. So.
Because, like other people say, something like it's so simple when the clock is changing time. Oh, you imagined it or you pushed a button or something like it. You can reason it out. Mm-hmm. But if you just accepted that it was a message, and then you will get more.
Yeah, you'll be open to more. It's all in the acknowledging, because then that starts building the trust. And as you trust, all those things open you more and more and more. Like I said, it's like a muscle that you're building, you're working. And as you work it, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The connection does. Mm-hmm. It just opens more. But you have to acknowledge and trust. If you don't, you're going to shut it down every time. So,
because they say, what do we have to do?
I mean, you might say, oh, yes, I want this on one hand, but then when it happens, you shut it down and you don't give it anything. Well, you're shutting it down yourself. So,
because you're wanting something more dramatic. If we even had one man in the class that kept saying, I want to hear him. I want to have communication. But yet when he talked about his life, he was getting instincts and feelings.
Absolutely. And he wasn't acknowledging that is them.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. And like I said, everybody receives their information in different ways. And as many different ways as there are of doing things, there are that many ways of getting information. But some people want to define it and restrict it to, well, this person sees it or hears them. So that, and I don't get it that way, so that means it's not happening to me. Well, no, that's not what it means at all. It just means you have your definition really closed down. Open it up and allow, gut instinct is one of those things. They might say, well, it's just your instinct. Well, where do you think that comes from?
That's what the man said. He said he's lived his whole life on his gut instincts. Right. And he said, boy,
so
you are communicating.
He's got fantastic trust going on there and everything. Yeah, so he doesn't need, I know he wants to hear them, but
he doesn't need
right now, this is working great.
Yeah, so acknowledge it.
Right.
Is there a caller there?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, this is Bessie. I'm from Tennessee. Hello to both ladies. I just think the world of both of you. Read all your books, Dolores. But I have you guys were talking about signs, how they show you signs. I've been noticing 333 several times a day, every day for several months. So I assume that they're trying to tell me something there. And also, Julia said on an episode, I think it might have been a rerun, of how when you hear these tones or the ringing in your ear, like I hear a lot of that. I've been hearing that a lot over the last year, especially when I meditate.
Oh,
I think Julia said something that has something to do with your vibration or something.
It does. It's a frequency. It's like it's a calling for you to raise your vibration, and that would make sense if it happens when you're doing meditation, because your vibration and your frequency is different at that point. And so it's like this higher frequency. It's like it's a calling to you to raise your frequency. And your meditation time is a perfect time to raise it, because you are in a very light state, and that's all you have to do to raise your frequency, is just to get yourself lighter. And so
you're in an altered state at that time.
Absolutely. And so you can think up, or I am God, things that will raise your vibration, and just play with it next time it happens, because when I do that, the ringing in the ears goes away almost immediately. And when that does that, it means you raised it up to match it. So.
Yeah, because I was wondering what I could do to make it go away, because it's happening a lot more often.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, well that's good information to know. Okay.
But look how time has speeded up, and the energy and the vibrations and frequencies are increasing all the time. And so that's what's happening. It's happening more often.
Absolutely, but that's exactly what that is. And so just do that. I like, you know how they joke, you know, I like to joke with like the Peter Pan, how they say, you know, think happy thoughts and you can fly. Well, it's along the same lines. It makes you lighter. And so just do that, up. Anything that raises you, that makes you think up, and see what happens. And that just means you raised your vibration now, and you're on that level.
Mm-hmm. Because our vibrations and frequencies are changing.
Right.
And this has been going on for several years.
So you can see.
And we're moving into the new earth.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
That's one way, but the other way are these little subtle things, you know, things that happen that most wouldn't matter to anybody else, just to the person that's experiencing it.
Right. Well, yeah, because it's significant to you. You know what it means. The person knows what it means.
Like seeing that carrier wouldn't mean that much to somebody else.
Right. Yeah, that was your message.
Yeah, it was something closing, I guess. Well, you know, we always, in my life anyway, it's always been cycles and closing off different things. Everything coming full circle.
Well, remember, it's all illusions, and we put it all there for ourselves. So it probably was something that you were finishing for yourself.
Yeah, maybe. You always think things are finished, but then they probably never are, or they're not. It's the way you think they are.
Right.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting, and yeah, even the man in our class said, "I want to hear them. I don't. I want to hear. Why don't they talking to me?" And yet he was having great success in his life by following his gut instinct.
Exactly. And that's what I was telling him. Just acknowledge that. I mean, that's working great for him. He actually is getting his messages. He's just not hearing them, which he's trying to define. This is what I want. Well, you know,
but
I would love to see beings. I don't. That's not my way of getting information. I get other stuff. So.
But yeah, they always say, listen to those instincts. That's them talking to you.
Right.
And if you follow what you're hearing, you're never going to go wrong.
Absolutely.
Because they're guiding you. But what else happened on the cruise then? We had
a lot of floating. Drifting and floating. A lot of rocking. Well, that one day after we finally did start sailing, we, like you said, we hit that little bit of a storm. It was one of those arms or something, and that was a rocky day.
And
it was a rocky night. They had at night.
They had to stop twice, though, to take people off that were sick.
Right.
And they had pulled into a port, and they couldn't pull in all the way, and they got them off the ship some way.
Yeah, and that's what he was meaning by it was an eventful cruise, because we had the hurricane, we had to stop and let people off, we had to, do things that were not in the charted course.
Yes, it was out of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. And they don't take somebody off of the ship unless it's pretty bad, because they do have a doctor and an infirmary on there. So it was interesting. I thought it was a cruise for old people, not counting me, of course.
Of course not.
Because there were wheelchairs, strollers, walkers everywhere. Strollers, I mean, scooters. All right, I said the wrong word. She's giving me a hard time, people.
It's what I do. It's my job.
But everywhere there were people on scooters and wheelchairs and walkers. Mm-hmm. But we thought, well, maybe they're the only ones that could take 2 weeks off.
I think that's what it was. First we were like, did somebody not give us a memo? But I think that's what it is. It's like, that's not real easy for everybody to do, and it was much easier for them to take that length of time.
Retired people.
Right.
But that was one complaint. They said people can't take a week vacation, but not 2. But otherwise, I think it went real well.
It did. It went very well.
I was trying to think if there was anything else that happened.
Well, besides the Panama Canal.
Oh, I was getting to that, yes.
I mean, on the way down, we went stopped at, because these are different stops than we've been used to going to, so that was nice. We had stops in Costa Rica and Port Chiapas. That was interesting. I actually that's where we stopped that was where we stopped, not Puerto Vallarta, it was Port Chiapas. We held there while we were waiting for the storm to go by. And, yeah, that's where we stopped. But that was interesting. It's a little town.
Uh-huh. But the main reason I wanted to do the cruise in the Panama Canal, because that's something I'd never seen, and I wanted to see how it was done, because I'd heard so much about it. So it took the whole day to go through the Panama Canal, because they just inch along. Because, you know, the Panama Canal, when it was built, the ships, of course, were much smaller. And now, after they began to get bigger, they cannot build any ships wider than the canal because you couldn't go through. So they have a limit on how wide they can be. That's why I think they're building them taller.
Yeah,
more floors.
If they go up, then they go out. So.
Yeah, more floors up, because they wouldn't be able to go through it. Now, there's ships in Europe that are wider, but those are for the Mediterranean cruises and those areas. They would never be able to go through the canal. But I wanted to see how it was done, and it was fascinating to watch. We saw some pictures of it later, and there was a ship right next to us. It had, like you would want to say, 2 lanes of traffic and a little meridian down the middle, what it looked like. And they were going the same direction, so we could watch the ship next to us go through and see it better. And they go through with just like with inches to spare. It was so close. It was a really tight squeeze. And that's why they were just inching along to go through there.
Well, it was also, those trains are what were kind of taking us through. I don't know how much we were doing on our own power through there.
I don't think the captain could have done it, try to steer it through there.
No, they keep it locked in place, and then it, it gets in those blocks, and it fills up, and then it just moves through to the next one. But it was smooth in a different way. I don't think it was going on its own power. I think they were taking it through.
But just like a little train on either side of the ship with cables connected to it, and like they were pulling it through. So it was just inching along. And then they have the locks that when you're coming in on the west side that raise the ship, and then when you get through, they will lower the ship on the east side. And I kept thinking, why? I always want to know why. My curiosity, I want to know, why do they have to do that? Why do they have to raise the ship up? And then they gave us little booklets that found out that the middle part of the isthmus, when you're going across there, is higher than the sides. So you've got to raise the ship up to that part. And they did it in an interesting way. They bring the ship in, then they close the locks. And it's big gates, solid gates that close, and then they put the water in. I'm going to say pour the water in.
Yeah, they pour it in with the bucket.
Yeah. And it raises the ship up, and then it gets the right level. They open the other one in front of it, and it goes through, and then they close it. It went through 3 of these as it was raising it up. And then when we finally got it raised high enough, we went into it was the largest man-made lake in the world. He said there's probably another one now. And they said when they were building the canal, they had to dam some rivers up there. And then when they did that, it created this huge lake. And it was full of lots of little islands that were covered with jungle, and nobody lives on those islands. And they said those were the tips of the mountains, what used to be the mountains. So you hit that lake, and the captain has to dodge around the islands.
I think that's where they picked up the pilot, and that guides them through there. They know where to go.
Yeah, because that's what he said. He has to maneuver through the island to get to the other side. And it took all day to do all of this. Then you get to the other side, you got to be lowered down. And it went into these locks again, just barely squeezing through with inches on each. It didn't look to us like he had any room at all.
No, that picture that you got from the front of the ship, it doesn't look like there's inches. Maybe an inch. It's not much room at all.
But then they come in, and the lock comes in, and they drain the water out. It makes it lower. And then it goes through the other lock and lowers it again. And whoever figured this out, he must have been a genius to figure out a lock system. Because they said in the beginning, this was first thought of back in the end of the 1800s. And everybody said, you can't do it, because the only way to get from one side to the other, you had to go all the way down around South America and come back up. And for years, they were trying to find the Northwest Passage, they called it, to go across the top of the world through the North Pole and up in the ice. And a lot of explorers lost their lives trying to find some way to go through that way, and nobody could ever find it. And the only other way was to go all the way around South America. But in the end of the 1800s, when they first came up with the idea, they said it couldn't be done. And they had a lot of failures, too. But then whoever came up with this idea has been a genius. So we went all the way through the locks, and everybody's up there on the decks watching as the whole thing makes these maneuvers. It was, and that was what I wanted out of the whole trip,
right,
was be able to see it do this.
You did.
I did. I got one more, what they call the bucket list.
Bucket list, yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to do, and I was able to say now I've seen the Panama Canal and how it works.
Firsthand.
Mm-hmm. Right there. I always want to see things firsthand. Then we know ourselves how it happens. So that took a whole day, and then we came out of that and went into the open sea. That's when we figured out it's smooth as long as you follow the coastline. You start into the open sea, headed for the islands in the Caribbean, it gets rough.
Yeah.
I mean,
open water is different from...
Yeah, that ship is really rolling, and you're going down the halls like a drunken sailor.
Right.
But we were in that for a few days as it went up. We went between Cuba and Haiti. And that took, before we did that, we stopped in, if we got out of the canal, we stopped in Colombia, right, South America.
Right.
And got to go ashore there. Then it headed up toward Cuba and Haiti.
Right.
And then you come through there, and once you're into the Caribbean, the water calms down again to where it's smooth,
right,
not bouncing.
Well, because you're around the islands again, too.
Yeah, and it calms the water down when you're around land.
Right.
And then we hit Miami, Fort Lauderdale. Then we came home. But I know when years and years and years ago, when I first went to the Philippines, well, that's when Julia was only a year old. And I was pregnant with Nancy, and we went on the ship because we were going to be stationed in the Philippines, in Cavite City, across the bay from Manila. And it took us a month to go across. We went over on the troop ship. Now, that was a whole lot different than this. And it took, I guess it might take weeks now if you were going to go the other way. There was a troop ship, and they were taking some families on there. It seems so primitive compared to what they've got now.
Well, it was a troop ship. They probably didn't even have cruise ships back there. Because someone was talking about the cruise ship started, and who was telling me this? They started in the 70s. And that's when the Love Boat was airing.
That TV
that's
series.
That's when the cruise ships were starting. That's when they started doing it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we went over there. You were born in 50.
Well, don't tell everybody.
The 50s. Okay.
Late 50s.
Okay. But so I don't think there was any cruise ships back then. But the troops were in the bottom of the ship, and they had little staterooms up on the top part, decks, and we were in one of those. And we were going out of San Francisco, and we were going out under the Golden Gate Bridge, and the captain announced, "Hate to tell you this, but the first thing we're going to do is hit a storm on the way out."
Let's just turn around and go back.
That's what I was thinking. Is it too late to turn around?
Right.
But it was pretty bad. It was rough. We had bunk beds in the room. That's all we had, and we had a crib that you were in. And we had to tie that to the side of the bunk beds, otherwise it was sliding all over the floor. And you were asleep, and yet you got sick. So I said, that shows it had, I thought you had to be awake to feel the motion. You got seasick anyway. But it was not like they have nowadays. When you were eating in the dining rooms, they had long tables, and they had a ridge built up all around the table, a couple of inch ridge. And that was to keep, because the dishes would slide all over the table, to keep them from going in the floor. That does sound kind of primitive compared to what they're doing now.
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
What do you think about it?
And entertainment, we all put a show on.
Oh, okay.
Of ourselves. All the ones of the Navy wives and everything, we did a show. So we had our own entertainment. But then coming back from the Philippines, we were there for 2 years. By that time, we had 2 more children that were born there. And we flew back, and it took a week to fly back. So those really were the old days, I guess.
Yes, they were the old days.
Prop plane.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also for troops and things. And we had to stop at different places, islands and things, to refuel. So, and that was the dark ages.
Yes.
And now you get on something that's a floating city.
Right.
I guess I didn't know when they started that.
I remember who told me that. Who was even talking about it? It was on this trip, and why they were even talking about it. But that's what they said was the cruises started in the 70s. Ships started.
Uh-huh. Well, we had Korea, we had Vietnam. I don't know if there would have been much demand for people taking vacations during those times, the 60s.
And then the show, the TV show, The Love Boat, that started out like right after that. You know, it's like, I guess because it's something new and it was advertising it.
Yeah. And that probably wasn't as grand of liners as they have now.
No, in fact, I mean, well, obviously they weren't. They were on stage. They were in studios.
Oh yeah,
so,
but I mean,
but no, those ships were smaller and everything, and they kept getting bigger and bigger. You know, so as the years went on.
Now they're enormous.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it was quite an experience.
It was a wonderful experience. And we're already starting to look at. You didn't know about this yet, but
now she tells me.
Because we've already had some people asking if we're going to do another one.
They said, are you going to make this an annual event? And I said, well, I don't know about that, an annual event.
Well, because part of it, again, is the time and working it out. So we decided, I have started looking at, someone had the idea of maybe a Hawaiian cruise. I thought, oh, that would be different. So I just looked, and that just got me in this direction. So I just put in Google and looked up cruises. In that area, and what it came up with, one that looks really, really exciting is a South Pacific cruise that actually goes from Chile over to this Papeete Island. It goes through Easter Island. Wouldn't that be cool?
But there you're in the open sea.
It is in the open sea. You just have to, but I think, maybe it's a really big ship to deal with it.
Well, after we went through all that rough waters, whenever you get in the open sea.
But it's also in the Pacific.
What is open water?
I don't know. It might be different.
Because Julia said she's been thinking about, we have an office in England. She goes to England a lot, about taking a cruise across the Atlantic instead of flying. But after that, hitting the open water.
Well, different times, when we've been on cruises, you can always tell when you hit open water. It's just different. And that's always been like, boy, that could be really different when you're out there totally in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah. So you're just thinking, I got to think about that if I want to go to England.
Right.
Like
right.
But, well, we are, I don't know if we told them on there or not, but after everything has been happening, we get messages loud and clear to cut back on the level 1 classes.
Yeah, on the big, long trips like that.
Yeah, because it is hard because we spend most of the year traveling. and having classes all over the world. But they were saying, let the technology take over and make more of the online, make a use of that, the online classes. And that is increasing. People are signing up for the online class.
Right.
Because, it's hard on me to keep going to all these countries all over the world.
I don't think people really realize. They say, well, you're over here. Can you just drop by my country and come and do something here? It's like, I don't think they're really thinking. So that's not easy for us to do.
And we're still getting invitations like that. Come to my country. Come to my country. I'll help you put it together. There's a lot of...
While we totally appreciate that, it's much easier said than done.
We got a lot of miles and a lot of water and a lot of air between here and there. So it's not easy to go to all these countries. That's why we lump them together and try to do a lot of stuff at one time while we're in that part of the world.
But like you said, we've been getting the messages to pull way back on the traveling.
And on the live level ones.
Live level ones. And so what we'll be doing predominantly is live level twos. But they're going to be mostly here close by. We'll do a few outside of the country. And I think we're going to do one live level one next year. But they're just pull back, let technology do it, and we'll even use technology to help us with the level twos in other countries. So this is where we start stretching those wings, figuring that part out.
Because by the online, with the internet now, I can reach a lot more people than I can by going to all these countries, and the class is being translated.
Right, we're working on that now.
Into these different languages so they can take it in these different countries. And they'll still be certified. All that will still be the same. But we have to keep the level 2 live because we do a lot of interaction, personal interaction with the people. And those are getting bigger. So those will have to be live for now unless later down the road we figure out a way to Skype.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They've said to use the technology to reach out to get to the other countries.
Mm-hmm.
During a live class, we're reaching out to other countries, streaming.
We might be able to do that live with Skype or something. But anyway,
I'm sure our technology people out there will figure it out for us.
Yeah. But we've got so many other things that are happening this next year that we had to make space for it.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're pulling back and allowing those things to happen. But right now we're not through this year yet.
No. Well, that was the messages. Finish this year, and then this all had to change for next year.
Yeah, because we are leaving Sunday. We won't be back until Christmas. We'll be gone for 6 weeks. That's why I won't be live then until we get back at Christmas. Every Thanksgiving, it seems like we're always out of the country, somewhere on the other side of the world. But Sunday, we leave for Beijing. And last year, we were in China 3 times, and we had classes over there. So we're going back to have level 2 and level 1 in Beijing. And then we go to Taiwan, because I gave a lecture there last year, and they wanted to come back and do a class. So we're doing a class and lectures and book signings in Taiwan. Then we go to Japan. It'll be the first time in Japan. They wanted us to come the year they had that big earthquake and the tsunamis and all of that in the nuclear meltdown. But they had to cancel. So we didn't go that time. But we're going to Japan this year after Taiwan. We'll have a first class there. Then when that's done, we scoot down to Australia. And I used to do many cities in Australia, but this time we're just going to do one. It's going to be Sydney. And I want everybody to know, if you're thinking about having a level 1 and a level 2 class with me.
We're
going to do both.
Or, yeah, but not
we're doing both classes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're thinking about doing this live, this will be the last time that I can think of I'm going to be in Australia.
For a while.
We're not making any plans.
Yeah, I'm sure down the road you might be back, but not anytime soon, no.
This will be the last class anybody would be able to get into. So if you're thinking about it, go online and check it out so you can get into it. It'll be in Sydney, That'll be in December.
Yeah.
It's around the middle part, because after that's over, then we head back, and we're back here just before Christmas. So there won't be any more live shows until we get back Christmas time. So anyway, check out the website. It has our schedule if anybody's interested in these other classes. I don't think you want to go to China or Japan.
You never know. They might.
Those are all done with translation. And we are planning on maybe one live level 1 in America.
It'll be in September. We're honing in on the date. So.
I thought it was going to be, summer is too busy with the conferences.
It'll be September.
Okay, but check our website on www.ozarkmountain.com, OZARKMT.com.
They want your schedule. They need to go to your site.
It's on there, DoloresCannon.com.
Yes, that's where your schedule is, all the classes. They're not on Ozark.
Okay, but if anybody's interested, we are changing our travel thing. So anyway, we're coming to the time to stop, and we won't be back on again until Christmas, but my ghost will be on, clone.
Your clone will be here.
My clone will still be on every week, but we'll be back live when we get back Christmas at the end of the year.
Right.
So thanks for listening tonight, and everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, and have a happy life.
Have a happy life. You're so funny tonight.
What a happy life.
I know, it just sounds funny.
No, it don't.
Sounds like you're never seeing them again. Everybody have a great...
I don't see them. They're in the virtual out there. Okay. All right. Good night, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Make it great.
If you enjoyed the show, check out more of our other videos and be sure to subscribe and click the like button. Thank you for listening to the Metaphysical Hour with Dolores Cannon.